Now, to formally close today's summit, we come back to Queensland, where we have been very graciously hosted by the Premier, and I now call on the Queensland Minister for Women, the Honourable Shannon Fentiman, to give the official closing to the 2006 summit.
Well, thank you so much. I am just so pleased to have been part of this historic summit. We have heard an overwhelming sense of commitment and determination from all of you in this room to combat violence against women and children. And never before have we seen such momentum for change and the momentum to really challenge the attitudes and behaviours that underpin the cycle of violence, the violence that is happening in our homes and our communities. From leaders of our national stage to local sporting clubs, workplace lunchrooms, our neighbourhoods, people are starting to recognise the role that they can play in tackling domestic and family violence. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that our efforts are being driven by a groundswell of community action and advocacy over many decades by many of you in this room today. So thank you. I'm really pleased today that we've had the opportunity to discuss some of the disconnection between the federal and state courts, the impact of the inconsistency between family courts and domestic violence courts that has on women seeking protection for themselves and their children. I think this is the area where national collaboration can have the most impact. We have to continue to work together to better share information across jurisdictions and progress further reforms, including those suggested by Rosie Batty and the Women's Legal Services and the Roundtable here today, to address the issue of cross-examination of victims by perpetrators. And another national priority, which has received much attention here today, is having consistency amongst jurisdictions to recognise domestic and family violence as a workplace issue. And I want to again echo the Premiers Palaszczuk, Andrews and Weatherall and the call for the introduction of 10 days paid leave to be in the national employment standards. And I'm also very pleased that we've had a critical focus today on the impact of domestic and family violence on our children. As the Child Safety Minister, it is concerning to me that half of all families that come to the attention of child safety have a reported incidence of domestic and family violence in the previous 12 months. And that's why I'm really pleased that the third action plan released today has a critical focus on children and putting children at the centre. The move of many jurisdictions, including Queensland, to recognise the importance of prevention-based school programs such as Respectful Relationships is vital work as we continue to try and challenge those attitudes that underpin the cycle of violence. But starting a national conversation means our services are under increased pressure. Loud and clear in the discussions today has been the importance of recognising that our continued awareness raising and advocacy has practical implications on the ground. We must, all of us, step up and contribute to increase funding and support for our hard-working services, which is why it is my hope that the goodwill, cooperation and determination expressed here today translates into real and sustained funding and support for these vital services who work with victims of domestic and family violence every day in our local communities. And we've heard today that domestic and family violence doesn't respect state borders, which is why it has been so vital for this issue to have been elevated to the Council of Australian Governments so we can take action right across the country. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Women's Safety Ministers in the weeks and months ahead to keep tackling domestic and family violence and keep this issue on the national agenda. And I know my ministerial colleagues would welcome the opportunity to meet more regularly to continue to progress this vital work across jurisdictions to better protect victims and hold perpetrators to account. The new national standards for perpetrator programs recently released, I think, are a good example of the work that can be done when we do come together across jurisdictions. These standards are now driving the expansion of important work with perpetrators. As the Prime Minister said this morning, we are here to support the women and children who are victims of domestic and family violence, and we have to stay focused on them. but we do need to discuss holding perpetrators to account. Earlier this year, I observed a court-ordered perpetrator program run by the Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Centre on the Gold Coast. And I have to say, I think it was the most confronting experience of my life. These were ordinary men, a variety of ages and professions, underscoring the point that domestic and family violence doesn't discriminate. A critical part of these sessions is to maintain an open line of communication with a perpetrator, to give them an outlet and allow the facilitator to pick up on concerns in order to ensure that their partner is offered greater support and protection. And it is difficult and it is dangerous work. The course facilitator expertly challenged views during this discussion around the theme of minimising, denying and blame versus accountability and respect. And I heard a lot of the first part. And as I sat observing these men, I heard over and over again the deeply ingrained and dangerous attitudes towards women. And I despaired about how many other people out there might share these views that were not getting any help to manage them or challenging these dangerous views. We have heard so much today about the kind of cultural change we need to instill in young people in order to develop the kind of healthy, respectful relationships which don't include violence. And witnessing these deeply ingrained attitudes reminded me of the importance of this work and the generational change that is required. In the roundtable this afternoon focused on protecting children, we heard from Denise Kotowski, a school principal in Mount Isa, who said we have to prevent children from becoming victims, from being bystanders, and from becoming perpetrators. We must focus on strengthening families and support earlier interventions. In Queensland, we have invested in the World First Renew program, an intensive 20-week course, which is a partnership between Corinity and the Domestic Violence Action Centre and works with young men and their siblings and their mothers to address concerning behaviour to break the intergenerational cycle of violence. And it's important work, because we know that violence used against mothers is a major risk factor in perpetrating violence as an adult. And we're supporting the groundbreaking work of Bravehearts in their Turning Corners program, which again aims to intervene earlier and support young people 12 to 17-year-old who are at risk of engaging in harmful sexual behaviour. These are just some of the examples and some of the programs that we've heard about today in many of the roundtables, and this focus on challenging the underlying attitudes and behaviours that underpin the cycle of violence is critical. Addressing violence against women and their children requires commitment from every Australian to stand up and say, as we do in Queensland, not now, not ever. We know the change is possible. We are all determined to achieve it. I want to particularly thank members of the Department of Premier and Cabinet and my Office of the Prevention of Violence Against Women. This has been an incredible feat to pull this together, and I think they've done a remarkable job. And I also want to thank each and every one of you, our delegates, from coming and sharing your experiences. I look forward to working with you over the months and years ahead as we continue to keep this issue on the national agenda. Thank you so much for your participation today.
Thank you, Minister. A beautiful way to close this summit. And this does officially bring the summit to a close. But the conversations that have begun here today and the connections must continue well beyond today. I think one of the things that has been highlighted, although we come to this issue from different perspectives and with different experiences and many of us with different expectations, one of the things that has been highlighted throughout today, certainly in all the conversations I've heard and the table discussions I've visited, is that there is not one person in this room who doesn't want to make the situation better, who doesn't want to work towards better outcomes for women and children in regard to violence. And that united front, obviously, is what's going to make a difference. Today has been just one day, but it is the beginning of a conversation. Thank you to all of the delegates who have participated for your openness to new ideas, your generosity in sharing your suggestions and your perspectives with others and with government. The outcomes from the summit will be written up by note takers and included in a report that will be sent on to the Ministers for Women's Safety for their consideration. I urge you also to keep an eye on the website, the dedicated website for the summit, which over the next couple of weeks will continue to upload more information, and you are most welcome to continue making submissions. Distinguished guests, delegates, you've been part of an important milestone in creating a unified national effort to end the scourge of violence, family, domestic and sexual violence against women and children. By working together across jurisdictions in a collaborative partnership and using innovative and practical thinking, we can make a difference. We know that, and we must. On that note, please extend this conversation now back in your states, your territories, your workplaces, your families, your communities. For now, thank you for your participation. Travel safely. Goodbye and good luck.